My name is Claude Donovan, and I am 35 years old. My mother decided that I would be watching 5 children over Christmas. She didn't ask me. She didn't suggest it. She stated it as if it were already finalized, as if my time, my plans, and my sanity were flexible pieces she could move around to make her holiday easier. It began with a family video call in early December, the kind where everyone ligs in with polite smiles, while quietly bracing for whatever responsibility is about to be assigned. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee and was still in my pajamas when my mother cleared her throat, in that deliberate way that signals an announcement. Then she said it plainly. Cla will stay home and watch the kids over Christmas. For a second I genuinely thought she was joking. I even laughed because it sounded so absurd. 5 children. My sister's 3, all under 7. And my cousin's twin toddlers who treated silence like an insult. I am sorry, what? I asked, certain I had misunderstood. My mother didn't hesitate. She gave that tight smile she uses when she believes she is being generous. It will be good for you. You do not have children of your own, and everyone else deserves a break. That was the exact moment something inside me shifted. Knit loudly. Knit dramatically. Just a quiet, steady realization that this was not to misunderstanding. This was a plan. A plan they had already agreed on without including me, assuming I would comply because I always had before. Pete, Christmas Eve babysitting. Christmas Day, babysitting. Late nights filled with tantrums and early mornings with sticky fingers on diapers, while everyone else enjoyed food, drinks, laughter. On the version of family time that never included sacrifice from them. I reminded her calmly that I had already requested time off work and had made my own plans. She dismissed it with a wave of her hand. You can relax later. Family comes first. That phrase hit harder than I expected. Family comes first, except when it comes to respecting me. Except when it comes to asking instead of ordering. Except when it comes to my boundaries. I could see the relief in my sister's face in the screen. I could see my cousin knitting as if this arrangement solved a problem she didn't want to deal with. No one paused to ask if I was okay with it. No one checked whether I wanted to spend the holiday as unpaid childcare while they celebrated. I ended the call politely, but my chest felt tight for the rest of the afternoon. The more I replayed the conversation, the clearer it became that this was not about the children. It was about expectation. I had always been the dependable one, the independent one, the one who didn't need help, and therefore could be volunteered for anything. I had worn that label proudly for years, not realizing it, had quietly turned into permission for everyone else to take advantage of my availability. That night, lying awake in the quiet of my apartment, I stayed at the ceiling and felt the weight of every holiday I had quietly surrendered. I realized I was not tired from work or from life. I was tired from being useful in demand. And for the first time I allowed myself to question whether being useful was worth the cost of never being asked. Over the next week, the messages kept coming, and each win was written like a tiny hammer, topping the same assumption deeper into place. My sister sent a cheerful text with a smiley face that said, "You are such a lifesaver," as if she had done me a favor by assigning me the role. My aunt followed with a joke about how I would be exhausted but fulfilled, like burnout was a holiday tradition, and I should be grateful to be included. My cousin chimed in with a laughing emoji and a comment about how her twins were in a phase where they screamed whenever the world didn't immediately obey them. No one asked, "Are you sure you can do this, Claire?" No one wrote, "If you can't, we will figure something out." The tone was unanimous. This had been decided, and the only thing left was the performance of appreciation to keep me from noticing the lack of consent. I tried to respond calmly at first. I wrote back that I had plans, that I had taken time off for myself, that I was not available for childcare. My mother replied with a single line that felt like a verdict. "We will talk later. Family comes first." That phrase again polished on repeated like a prayer, except the faith behind it was not love, it was entitlement. I began sleeping badly. I would drift off and then jolt awake with my chest tight, as if my body had realized what my mind was still trying to negotiate. I kept seeing the holiday version of myself that my family expected, the version who showed up early, stayed late, cleaned up the mess, smiled through the case, and told herself it was fine, because that was what good daughters did. The memories came back in sharp flashes. Me at 27, standing in a kitchen on New Year's Eve, while everyone else counted down around a TV. My hands in soapy water, scraping dried food off plates, because the children had spilled everything and someone had to fix it. Me at 31, missing a weekend trip I had saved for, because my sister called crying and said she just needed one little favor. Only for that favor to become 3 days of babysitting, while she went out with friends and told people she was finally getting a break. Each time I had swallowed the resentment, because it felt easier than the guilt. Easier than being labeled selfish. Easier than watching my mother's face tighten into disappointment. That was their greatest weapon, not anger, not yelling, but the quiet suggestion that I was failing at being family. If I said no. Then, 3 days before Christmas, the final confirmation arrived like a stamp and a document I had never signed. It was a group message from my mother. Kids will be dropped off at class place Christmas Eve morning. Thanks again. No, question mark. No pause. No space for me to breathe. I stayed at my phone for a long time. My hands began to shake, not from fear, but from a kind of anger so clean and sharp. It cut straight through the fig of obligation. It was not even the childcare that made me furious. It was the casualness. The way my home had been claimed like a location in a schedule. The way my time had been treated like a resource they could allocate. The way gratitude was used as a seal to make refusal look rude. I put the phone down and walked around my apartment, as if the movement could shake loose the feeling that I was trapped. I looked at the couch, the kitchen table, the quiet corners that had been my refuge, and I pictured them filled with noise and crumbs on sticky hands. With someone else's children occupying every inch, while I smiled through exhaustion, because that is what was expected. I realized that if I stayed I would hate them, and worse, I would hate myself for staying. That night I did something I had never done before. I opened my laptop and went to a flight website. I searched for the first plane out of town on Christmas Eve. I did not overthink it. I did not call anyone. I did not warn anyone. I did not write a long explanation designed to soften the blow. I simply chose an early morning flight, one-way window seat. My finger hovered for a second over the purchase button, and I felt the old training rise up in me. The reflex to hesitate, to ask permission, to consider everyone else's comfort before my own. Then I thought about that group message, that confident, careless announcement, and something in me hardened into clarity. I clicked buy. The confirmation email landed in my inbox a few seconds later. I stared at it, expecting the familiar wave of guilt to crash over me. It did not. Instead, my lungs filled as if I had been holding my breath for years, and had only just realized it. I sat back in my chair and let out a laugh that surprised me. Not because it was funny, but because it felt unreal, that freedom could be purchased with a single decision. For the first time, I was not negotiating. I was not pleading. I was not preparing to justify my existence. I was leaving. In Christmas Eve morning, while my mother was probably packing snacks into labeled bags and coordinating drop-off times like a general organizing troops, I was standing in an OPOT security line with a small suitcase and a one-way boarding pass in my hand. The terminal smelled like kiffy and winter coats. Families rushed past me with wrapped gifts and tired children, and for the first time in years, none of it belonged to me. My phone had already started buzzing before I even reached the gate. Messages stacking up. Beam. Missed calls multiplying. I did not open a single one. I sat in a plastic Alpot chair, watching planes take off through the wide windows, feeling something unfamiliar settle into my chest. It was not fear. It was not regret. It was anticipation. When they called my boarding group, my heart pounded hard enough that I could hear it in my ears. Not because I thought I was doing something wrong, but because I knew I was doing something new. I walked down the narrow aisle of the plane, found my window seat, and buckled in. As the aircraft began to taxi, my phone vibrated again in my coat pocket. I did not look. For once, I chose silence over explanation. The engines roared, the ground tilted. On the city that had held all those expectations shrunk beneath the clouds. I pressed my forehead lightly against the cool window, and watched everything get smaller. The houses, the roads, the invisible lines of obligation. It felt symbolic in a way that almost made me laugh. I was not just leaving town. I was stepping out of a role. The flight was only a few hours, but it felt like a cruising. Somewhere above the clouds, I realized how used to tension I had become. How normal it had felt to carry the weight of everyone else's convenience. Without the constant buzzing of demands, my mind felt strangely quiet. When we landed, I turned my phone to airplane mode again before it could reconnect fully. I collected my bag and stepped into the cold air of a city that did not expect anything from me. The hotel was small and understated, the kind of place we know. One asked questions beyond your name and credit card. I checked in, rode the elevator up alone, and unlocked the door to a quiet room with neutral walls and crisp white sheets. I set my suitcase down and stood there for a moment, just listening. No crying. No arguing. No one calling my name from another room. Just silence. I ordered room service without asking anyone else what they wanted. I turned in the television just for background noise, and then turned it off, because I preferred the quiet. Sitting in the edge of the bed, I felt the first real wave of emotion rise in me. It was not guilt. It was relief so deep it almost hurt. I laughed out loud, a soft, disbelieving sound. This was what it felt like to not be automatically available. This was what it felt like to choose myself without negotiating. I knew my family was probably standing outside my apartment building, by now, confused, irritated, maybe even outraged. I imagined the kids restless and impatient, my sister checking her phone over and over, my mother's expression hardening as she realized I was not answering. A part of me braced for the confrontation that would inevitably come. But another part of me, stronger than it had ever been, understood something simple and steady. I had given them years of quiet compliance. I had earned one morning of freedom. I thought that would be the end of it. A quiet rebellion. A peaceful holiday spent alone. I didn't know yet that by boarding that plane, I had stepped into something much larger than an escape. That evening, I was halfway through a plate of room service pasta when my phone lit up again. Even through the muted notifications I had tried to ignore. A new call came in, and before I could think, before I could remind myself that I owed no one an explanation, my thumb moved on its own. I answered. The screen filled instantly with faces, too close and too bright, like they had been waiting with the camera ready. My mother was there, my sister, my cousin, and my Aunt Margaret holding her phone, at an angle that made her forehead look enormous. In the background I could hear the children, restless voices and sudden crying, the sound of Case trying to push its way into the frame. My mother's expression was furious, not worried, not confused, but offended, as if my absence was a personal betrayal rather than the predictable result of her own entitlement. "Where are you?" she demanded, and it was not even phrased like a question. I swallowed once, feeling the hotel room around me, the quiet walls, the closed door, the distance that suddenly felt like armor. "I am not home," I said evenly. "I told you I had plans." My mother's eyes narrowed. My sister's mouth tightened into a line. My cousin shifted the camera, and one of her toddlers let out a piercing shriek somewhere off-screen. Then my Aunt Margaret leaned forward, as if she had been holding back something and could not wait any longer. "Well," she said, and her voice had an edge I did not hear often. "Since we are all here, I might as well read this out loud." She lifted a piece of paper into view. My stomach dropped before my brain even caught up, because I recognized it instantly. The handwriting. The way the envelope had been folded. The letter my grandmother had sent weeks ago. My grandmother had been quieter lately, more careful with her words, the kind of woman who could sit in a room and see everything without saying much. She had told my aunt. She wanted the letter read to the family in Christmas if she was not there. I had assumed it was one of her sentimental messages. A gentle reminder to be grateful, to stay close, to forgive. I had never imagined it would be anything else. My mother's head snapped toward my aunt. "What are you doing?" she hissed. My aunt didn't back down. "I am doing what she asked," she said. And then, without waiting for permission, she began to read. The room and my screen shifted in an instant. My sister stopped moving. My cousin froze. Even the children's noise seemed to fade as adults started shushing them, sensing a seriousness they could not explain. My aunt's voice was steady at first, then it trembled slightly as she continued, her eyes flicking between the page on the faces witching. Halfway through, my sister's expression changed. The practiced holiday smile disappeared, like it had been wiped away. My mother's face went pale, net with sadness, but with the kind of shock that comes when control slips out of your hands. Someone F-screen whispered, "What?" as if the word had escaped before they could stop it. I sat in the edge of the hotel bed, fork resting in the plate, barely breathing. It felt surreal, like I was watching a scene from far away, yet every sentence pulled tighter around something that had been hidden for years. My aunt read on, and with each line, the air in that call grew heavier. My cousin's eyes widened. My sister's lips parted, then pressed together. My mother looked like she wanted to reach through the screen and snatch the paper away. When my aunt reached the final paragraphs, her voice shook hard enough that she had to pause, swallow, and keep going. Then, she finished. The silence afterward was so complete it felt like even the connection itself had stopped for a second to absorb what had just happened. No one spoke. No one moved. The children's confusion returned in a small whimper somewhere in the background, but the adults didn't even react at first. They were staring at my aunt, and then at the camera, and then at me, like the flaw beneath them had disappeared. My sister's voice came out thin and broken. "This can't be happening." My mother opened her mouth, then closed it, like she couldn't find a sentence that would put things back into order. Finally she whispered, "What? This can't be happening." And there was something in that whisper that sounded less like disbelief and more like panic. I sat there miles away, realizing that boarding that plane hadn't simply removed me from the holiday plan. It had placed me outside the reach of their usual control at the exact moment. Something much bigger was being revealed. And none of them had seen it coming. My mother was the first to recover, or at least the first to try. Her face tightened, lips pressed together so hard they nearly disappeared. And she leaned closer to the camera as if proximity could turn the truth back into something manageable. "That letter is outdated," she said quickly, too quickly. The way people speak when they are trying to outrun damage. Mim was emotional when she wrote it. My Aunt Margaret didn't flinch. She adjusted her glasses with a steadiness that made my stomach twist, then held the page up again, as if the ink itself could testify. "It is dated last month," she replied, "and it is notarized." That one sentence landed like a gavel. I watched my sister's eyes, to my mother, searching for reassurance, for a script, for anything that would make this feel less real. My cousin's mouth fell open and then snapped shut again. Someone off-screen muttered a curse under their breath. My aunt continued because there was no going back now. What she had read, what had made every single person gasp, was not a sentimental holiday note. It was my grandmother's explanation of her will, and the reason behind it, written plainly and painfully, as if she had decided she was done speaking in hints. She wrote about wishing me be treated like the default sacrifice for years, wishing my boundaries be dismissed with smiles, wishing me be labeled independent only when it was convenient, wishing the family praise my strength, while quietly relying on it as a resource. She wrote that she hadn't been blind, not even once, to how often I was expected to give up my time, so that everyone else could keep theirs. Then she revealed what no one in that call had expected. She had quietly helped me financially for years, investing money in my name, building something protected, something that couldn't be touched by guilt or group pressure. She had done it deliberately, legally, and in silence. And then came the line that changed the temperature in the room. The line that made my sister's face drain of color, and my mother's pupils tighten. My grandmother had transferred control of a trust to me alone, effective immediately. And she had named me the executor of several family assets after her passing. The words felt surreal even to me, not because I doubted my grandmother's capability, but because I had never known she was witching with that level of precision. Never known she had been building a safety net while I was still trying to earn basic respect. My sister spoke first, voice cracking in a way that sounded like outrage, trying to disguise itself as disbelief. "That isn't fair." My cousin demanded to know why she hadn't been told. My mother's face hardened into something I recognized. Nit shock anymore, but accusation. the old weapon she used when she felt power slipping. Cla manipulated her, she snapped. And for Yaz that sentence would have made my stomach drip, would have sent me scrambling to defend myself, to prove I was good, to prove I was not the villain they needed me to be. This time it did not. I felt an unexpected calm spread through me, slow and steady, as if my body finally understood that fear was optional. I took a breath and said evenly, I didn't even know about the letter until right now. Silence hit again, heavier this time, because the truth was too clean to argue with. My aunt glanced down at the page and then back up, and I saw something in her expression that looked like regret, like she wished she had been brave sooner. There is Ma, she said, and my mother's head snapped toward her again. My aunt explained that the trust didn't just exist, it had conditions, very specific ones, written in language that was impossible to misinterpret. Any family member who tried to pressure me, threaten me, publicly shame me, or coerce me into giving time labor, or money would automatically forfeit access to future financial support connected to certain shared properties on accounts. I watched the realization spread across the faces like a slow wave. The irony was almost poetic. The same people who had tried to bully me into witching 5 children over Christmas had just disqualified themselves by doing exactly that. Not only in the weeks leading up to the holiday, but now, live in a call, with their anger and accusations laid out like evidence. My mother's cheeks went red and her voice rose. So what, she demanded, you think you are better than us now? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. I just said the truth as simply as possible. Because for once I didn't need it to be accepted to be real. No, I said, I think I am done being treated like free labor. The words hung there, and for a moment now, when moved, as if the family had finally met a version of me they didn't know how to manage. A version that didn't apologize for having limits. Shall I continue with part 6? My sister lusted first, her face twisted in a way that was half fury, half panic, the expression of someone who had just realized the ground they have been standing in was never solid. You are ruining Christmas, she snapped, and the words came fast, stacked and top of each other like she had been rehearsing them. You abandoned everyone. You really get in a plane and left us to deal with this. Do you even hear yourself? This is what family is. We step up? My cousin jumped in voice sharp, demanding to know what exactly the trust included, what properties were tied to it, why she hadn't been told sooner. As if information could be used like a lever to pry control back into her hands. My mother stared at me with a look I had seen my entire life. The look that said, you will fix this if I push hard enough. So now you think you can just disappear, she said, and come back acting like you are in charge. The children were still in the background, restless, confused, sensing the tension without understanding it. One of them began to cry, and I watched an adult scoop them up and carry them out of the room, whispering that everything was fine, even though nothing was. It was strange, seeing them finally remove the children, as if suddenly they remembered that kids shouldn't be exposed to adult conflict, even though they had been perfectly willing to expose me to it for years. My mother's voice sharpened again. This is selfish, Claire. You always do this. You pull away when things get hard. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. As if my entire life hadn't been defined by staying, by bending, by absorbing everyone else's needs, until there was nothing left of mine. My sister kept going, the accusations spilling out now. She said I was cooled. She said I was ungrateful. She said my grandmother must have been confused. She said I was turning money into a weapon. Each sentence was designed to pull me back into the old role. The one where I explained myself until my throat hurt. The one where I apologized just to end the tension. The one where I proved my love by surrendering. And for the first time in my life I did none of it. I didn't argue. I didn't justify. I didn't soften my tone to make them feel comfortable. I just listened calm enough that my own steadiness felt like a boundary they could knit cross. My Aunt Margaret finally interrupted, and her voice was quiet but firm, the way a person speaks when they have stopped being afraid of the reaction. Enough, she said. This is exactly what she meant. My mother turned toward her. Didn't take her side, she snapped. My aunt didn't blink. It is knit to side, she replied. It is the truth. This didn't start today. It just ended today. That sentence hit like a door closing. My sister's mouth opened, then shut. My cousin looked away. My mother's eyes flashed with something ugly, a mix of rage and realization. She understood, I think, in that moment, that her usual tools were failing. Guilt was not landing. Authority was not working. The threat of disappointment was not pulling me back. She tried one last time, her voice dropping into a colder tone. The wind meant to make me feel small. So what now, she said. You are just going to leave us. You are going to sit there in some hotel and let everyone struggle. I took a slow breath, feeling the quiet room around me, the distance, the fact that I was safe in a way I had never been in a family holiday. I am not leaving you, I said evenly. I am leaving the assumption that I owe you. My mother's face tightened. Unbelievable, she muttered, as if the idea of me having boundaries was an insult. My sister started to speak again, but my aunt cut her off with a small shake of her head, like she could see exactly where the conversation was going, and refused to let it become another pile-in. The silence that followed was different than before. It was not shock anymore. It was calculation. It was them trying to figure out what to do next, now that the old dynamic had cracked. My mother looked at the screen for a long moment. Then without a goodbye, without a closing statement, she ended the call. Just like that? One second that faces filled my phone. The next it was a black screen reflecting my own. I sat there staring at it, waiting for the familiar wave of guilt to surge up. Waiting to feel the old panic. That told me I had done something unforgivable. It didn't come. Instead, there was relief deep unsteady, like my body had finally stopped preparing for impact. I set the phone down in the bed, picked up the remote, and then changed my mind and let the room stay quiet. I ordered dessert, something sweet and unnecessary, and ate it slowly, while the city outside my window moved in with its own holiday. Unaware that a private family empire had just shifted in a video call. In the silence after the call, I realized something that surprised me. The hottest pot had not been leaving. The hottest pot had been staying all those years on calling it love. The fallout did not arrive all at once. It came in waves, like weather that could not decide whether it wanted to be a storm or a drizzle. The first messages hit within minutes after the call ended, angry and frantic, as if volume alone could pull me back into line. My sister sent paragraph after paragraph telling me I was cruel, that I had embarrassed her, that I had made her look like a bad mother, that I had destroyed the holiday for everyone. My cousin demanded details, asked what exactly I controlled now, what accounts were included, what my grandmother had put in writing. Because even in the middle of a family meltdown, she was thinking about access. My mother didn't message at all, which was its own kind of message. She went silent the way she always did, when she believed silence would punish me. In the past, that silence had worked. I would scramble to repair things, apologize for having needs, soften my words, EFI compromises that always ended with me, giving more than I could afford. This time I didn't chase her. I didn't send a follow-up explanation. I didn't write the long, careful text, designed to make everyone feel better about using me. I turned my phone face down and watched a mindless movie in the hotel television until my eyes grew heavy. I slept more deeply than I had in weeks. Christmas morning was quiet. I woke up late, ordered breakfast, and took a long shower without rushing, without hearing anyone call my name through a door. For a moment I felt a strange emptiness, knit sadness exactly. But the absence of a role I had played for so long that my body didn't know what to do with the space. Then I felt something else underneath it, something steadier. Peace? Over the next few days, the messages shifted. Anger gave way to fake sweetness, as if they had realized rage might trigger the conditions my aunt had described. My cousin wrote, "Hope you are enjoying your little trip. We should all talk soon." My sister sent a single line that said, "Can we just move past this?" My Aunt Margaret texted me privately, "I am proud of you." And I stayed at that message for a long time before replying, because it felt so unfamiliar to be supported instead of managed. My mother didn't speak to me for weeks. I found out later through my aunt that she was furious. Not only because she had lost control, but because she had been exposed. My grandmother's letter had put words to what everyone had quietly benefited from. And once something has been named, it becomes harder to pretend it is not happening. Eventually, my sister tried again, cautious this time, testing the waters with a tone that sounded almost respectful. She asked how I was doing. She asked if I had gotten home safely. Then, like a Han sliding towards something it thinks it still owns, she asked if I could help out a little financially, just temporarily. Because things were tight and the kids needed things and I was doing so well now. It was almost impressive how quickly the conversation curved back toward what she wanted. I looked at the message and felt no heat rise in me. No urge to argue, no need to prove anything. I simply typed no. And that was it. It was the easiest no I had ever said. Here is the part no one talks about. Setting boundaries doesn't feel powerful at first. It feels lonely. It feels like standing outside in the cold after closing a door you were trained to keep open. For a while I kept expecting the cold to turn into panic, kept expecting myself to run back on Nick, to apologize, to EFA warmth at my own expense. But the cold didn't break me. It cleared me. I started therapy not because I felt broken, but because I wanted to understand how I had been conditioned to equate love with compliance. I'd traveled more. Not to prove a point, not to punish anyone. But because I realized how many parts of my life I had postponed, while waiting for permission that was never going to come. I stopped explaining my choices to people who had never listened. Months later, my Aunt Margaret visited me. We sat in my kitchen with mugs of tea, and she admitted she had been scared to read that letter out loud. She said, my mother had tried to stop her, had warned her not to create drama, had called her disloyal. My aunt said she almost backed down, almost folded. Because that is what everyone in our family had always done when my mother pushed. Then she looked me in the eyes and said, they needed to hear it, and you needed to leave. I believed her. I believed it because I could finally see the pattern clearly. Every time I stayed, the pattern continued. Every time I sacrificed, it confirmed their assumption. Leaving didn't just protect my holiday. It broke the script. When I think back to that moment, my mother and that call demanding to know where I was. My sister insisting I was ruining everything. The words "this can't be happening" echoing across a screen full of shocked faces. I do not feel the rage I expected to feel. I feel gratitude. Gratitude that my grandmother saw what I had tried to normalize. Gratitude that my aunt had the courage to read the truth out loud. Gratitude that I listened to the quiet voice inside me before it turned into something louder and uglier. In Christmas Eve, I boarded a plane, and in doing so, I finally chose myself. If you have ever been treated like your time doesn't matter, like your boundaries are optional, like your worth is tied to how much you give up, I want you to hear this clearly. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not staying and fixing everything. Sometimes the bravest thing is leaving before you lose yourself. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment and tell me where you are listening from. And if you have ever had a moment where you finally chose yourself, and do not forget to subscribe, so you do not miss the next story.